I never expected that what was supposed to be a joyous family celebration would feel like walking onto a stage where I was nothing more than a token prop. My name is Adrian Cole, and I'm 34 years old. For the past 6 years, I have built a quiet life in Savannah, Georgia, working as an independent graphic novelist and raising my niece Sofia, now 7 years old, since her parents died in that car crash. I grew up in a tiny bayou town in Louisiana, 2 years older than my brother Callum. We were inseparable back then, building rickety tree houses among the cypress knees, whispering secrets until fireflies blinked out, and carving our initials into the thick bark of the old oak behind our church. He taught me to fish with bent cane poles at dawn. I taught him to read under dim flashlight beams in patched quilts at night. That world of moss-draped afternoons and hidden hideaways felt distant as we drove over the Causeway Bridge into New Orleans, the city's ornate skyline glimmering under a late spring sunset. My cousin, Elara Beaumont, was hosting her and her husband Damien's 20th anniversary gala, and she had spared no expense: rows of crystal candelabras, swathes of ivory silk, and tables heaped with oysters, shrimp étouffée, and crawfish beignets. Damien's clients from his tech investment firm circled nearby, clinking champagne flutes. Callum strode beside me in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, the kind that made him look 6 inches taller and impossible to ignore. He'd always been the golden boy, star quarterback in high school, valedictorian, now head of his own environmental engineering startup. People admired him, trusted him, everything I was not expected to be. I kept one hand firmly on Sofia's small fist. Her bright blue eyes danced from the draped columns to the gilded mirrors, her dark curls bouncing as she tried to stand perfectly still in her tiny blazer and matching bow tie. This night meant everything to her. She believed it would be magical. I had taken out a second mortgage on my condo just to pay for her outfit, the limousine ride, and an after-party babysitter. All so she wouldn't feel out of place among Elara's social climbing friends. Yet the moment we entered the grand ballroom off the riverfront, something cold slithered across my spine. The throng of guests parted before us as if driven by a subtle breeze of disapproval. Elara's colleagues, glitter-rimmed influencers, suave developers in pressed suits, and charity ball veterans swept past us like we were invisible. When a woman in a sequined sheath overheard that I wrote graphic novels, she flicked a perfect eyelash and sighed. How adorable. She then turned back to Damien's hedge fund associates, recounting last quarter's gains, leaving Sofia clutching my leg, as if for reassurance. I swallowed bile, masking my hurt with a polite nod, and guided Sofia toward a marble alcove overlooking the swollen Mississippi. Callum's college roommate, Tristan, now a rising architect from Dallas, greeted us, all firm handshakes and easy smiles. When I mentioned my latest book contract, he leaned in with genuine interest. But before I could hand him a business card, Elara glided over, all gleaming hair and practiced warmth. "My dear Adrian," she cooed, placing a white satin sash across my chest. "And precious Sofia," she added, tying a matching ribbon on my niece. "We've given you a very special honor tonight, guest book attendant and assistant sign-in. We simply cannot let these memories fade." She held out a silver pen as if presenting a ceremonial sword. Behind her, a cluster of socialites exchanged amused glances. I forced a smile and smoothed the sash. "Thank you, Elara." "It's an honor," I managed, my voice a brittle veneer. Sofia looked up at me, confusion creasing her small forehead. "Why can't we just enjoy the party?" she whispered. "Because, sweetheart," I murmured back, brushing aside her tangled curls, "every great celebration needs its helpers." Inside, I felt as though my dignity were unraveling stitch by stitch. What was intended as a gathering of loved ones had become a showcase, and we were the ornamental bench warmers. We positioned ourselves beside a heavy oak table beneath a gilded portrait of Elara and Damien, where we pretended to shepherd pens and parchment while guests drifted past, murmuring about which hors d'oeuvre station to attack next. I heard a fashion influencer smirk. "I've never seen a more active guestbook station. Family really does make the best decor." Laughter trailed like shards of glass. I clenched my teeth and took a deep breath, determined not to reveal my embarrassment. I would stand tall for Sofia's sake, remind her that family, even when unkind, is still family. Yet, as the chandelier lights flickered like distant stars, I wondered how long I could keep up this pretense before my heart gave way under the weight of that mocking applause and that satin sash, symbols of my family's willingness to reduce me and my niece to silent ornaments in their flawless evening. Already reeling from the whispered remarks, I tried to slip away with Sofia to find Callum. But a woman in a sequined dress blocked our path, Damien's assistant, Madeline, her stiletto heels clicking against the marble floor like ominous metronomes. "Oh, Adrian," she purred, arching a perfectly plucked brow. "Isn't it sweet that Ilara entrusted you with such an important role tonight? After all, you're so independent, juggling a child and a freelance career. I'm honestly amazed you manage it all." I forced a strained smile. "Thank you, Madeline. It really is a blessing." Her lips curved in a mockery of warmth that didn't reach her eyes. Behind her, several sponsors nodded in agreement as though savouring my discomfort. Sofia tugged at my sleeve. "Mum says you're amazing, Uncle Adrian." Her innocent praise reminded me why I'd sacrificed so much to be here, to support family, to stand by Callum, even when they reduced us to accessories. We found Callum by a cluster of white orchids surrounding a marble fountain. His expression was pained when he saw our satin sashes draped awkwardly over our shoulders. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "You both deserve better than this." I placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Don't apologize for me, Callum. I've weathered tougher critiques than a family gala." He managed a small, sad smile, golden cufflinks glinting in the chandelier light, as if mocking my bruised dignity. Just before dinner, I led Sofia to a quieter corner beneath a row of arched windows. I showed her the rough sketches I'd made of her dressed like a princess in my next graphic novel. "Look," I said, pointing to a pencil-rendered panel of a boathouse and morning glories. "There you are, helping me paint the shutters." Her face lit up. "That's perfect, Uncle Adrian," she exclaimed, gripping my hand. But our moment of calm was shattered when the MC tapped his microphone. A hush fell over the crowd as Ilara took the lectern, champagne flute in hand. She began with effusive thanks to sponsors and vendors, then paused, her gaze drifting toward us. "And of course, our dear family," she continued, her tone sharpening. "Though they're so very busy with their own projects. Adrian writes those delightful little novels in his spare time when he's not chasing after Sofia. And Sofia does her best to keep pace with tonight's festivities." A ripple of laughter echoed through the hall. My pulse thundered in my ears. Sofia's cheeks flushed, tears brimming in her wide eyes. I gripped her hand beneath the table, harboured only one thought: protect her. As Ilara raised her glass to applause, I realized this was no longer simply a gala. It had become a public performance of my family's contempt. And yet, watching Sofia clutch my hand, I knew I would not leave. Not until the truth had its turn in the spotlight. I had only two choices: flee with Sofia or stand my ground. Glancing at her brave little face, I knew what I had to do. Steeling myself, I rose from my seat and made my way toward the raised dais, every eye in the room snapping to my movement. Clearing my throat, I raised my voice so that the hush that fell over the ballroom carried my words. "Ilara, thank you for that heartfelt introduction. However, I believe our guests deserve to hear a different perspective." A ripple of surprised murmurs ran through the crowd. I spotted the DJ's booth just off to the side and nodded to the technician who passed me one of the wireless microphones. My heart pounded as I turned back to face the room. Sofia rose to her feet beside me, her small hand finding mine. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice shaking but growing stronger with each syllable. "But there's something important you should know about tonight's festivities." I turned to Sofia. "Would you like to tell them what you discovered 3 weeks ago?" Her wide eyes met mine. With a small nod, she stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice rang clear and true. 3 weeks ago, Uncle Adrian and I were at the river market, picking out flowers to decorate the anniversary tables. I saw Aunt Ilara there, with a stack of envelopes. She told me they were invitations for her charity fundraiser. She held up a crisp white envelope for all to see. She said every dollar would go to the local children's art program. A hush fell. I continued. But when we opened one of those envelopes at home, this is what we found. I produced the fundraiser receipt Ilara had carelessly left inside. The payee listed simply as Beaumont Events, LLC, Ilara's own company, with $0. Donated to any charity. Gasps spread like wildfire. Faces paled, sponsors stared at one another in disbelief, influencers muttered behind cupped hands. Callum stormed onto the dais, eyes blazing, and the gala's pristine facade began to crumble. Ilara's lips trembled as she tried to speak, but only a strangled sound emerged. Damien stepped forward, his carefully orchestrated smile gone slack. Murmurs of outrage rippled among the guests as they realized the entire charity theme had been nothing but a sham to pad Ilara's bottom line. Sofia squeezed my hand, her young voice unflinching as she added, "That's why Aunt Ilara had us sign the guest book so many times. She needed every name for a press release, not for memories." She looked out at the stunned crowd. "That's not generosity, that's deception." Suddenly the ballroom felt too small, the chandeliers too bright. Sponsors and clients gathered in tight clusters, whispering about cancelled contracts and pulled donations. I wrapped an arm around Sofia, lifting her slightly so she could see everyone's faces up close. She looked resolute, no longer the timid child I'd cautiously led in. Callum pulled me aside as the crowd's frenzy swirled around us. "You did it," he murmured, pride and apology mingling in his tone. "You both did it." I nodded, chest pounding. For the first time all evening I felt a surge of vindication. Sofia's innocent courage had torn down the gilded veneer, exposing raw truth. And in that shattered silence I sensed the room's temperature shift, from polished indifference to uncomfortable accountability. The DJ fumbled to restart the music, but no one moved. The bandleader set his baton aside. Ilara's voice cracked as she tried to regain control, but her words fell flat. Tonight, honesty had claimed the stage, and nothing could march over it again. In the aftermath of our revelation, the gala descended into controlled chaos. Sponsors clustered in tight huddles, furiously tapping smartphones to cancel any future engagements. Social media influencers snapped photos and live-streamed the disintegration of Ilara's carefully curated image. Knocked off her pedestal, Ilara slumped against the lectern, mascara running down her cheeks in jagged streaks. I took Sofia's hand and led her toward a quieter lounge area off the ballroom. Plush velvet settees and low lamps offered a refuge from the mounting hysteria. She sat down on one cushion, legs swinging, while I settled beside her, heart still hammering with adrenaline. "Did I do okay, Uncle Adrian?" she whispered, eyes shining with equal parts fear and triumph. "You were perfect," I answered, wrapping an arm around her small shoulders. "You spoke the truth, and sometimes that takes all the courage in the world." She nodded solemnly. "But what happens now?" I smiled against the tension knotting my chest. "Now people will have to decide whether they value honesty more than appearances, and I think some of them will be glad you reminded them of what really matters." From the main room came the muted roar of frustrated guests, staff scurrying to salvage the evening's catering, and the distant clink of overturned champagne glasses. I realized this gala, designed to showcase Ilara's success, had imploded into a glaring testament to greed and pride. The very tables groaning under the weight of gourmet hors d'oeuvre now stood as silent witnesses to her deceit. Callum appeared in the doorway, his sharp tuxedo rumpled, eyes dark with sympathy. Without a word, he slipped onto the settee opposite me, resting his elbows on his knees. "I can't believe she'd used charity as a marketing ploy," he said, jaw clenched. I looked at him, gratitude swelling. Thank you for standing by us. He shook his head. You both deserved better. Let me handle this. Rising, he straightened his jacket and strode back into the fray. Minutes later, I heard him speaking in measured tones, diffusing enraged donors, promising refunds, and severing Ilara's financial ties. It was the same calm authority he'd once displayed in boardrooms. Now he wielded it to contain the fallout and protect our family's name. Sofia leaned against me, her small head resting on my arm. I noticed how serene she seemed now, as if unburdened by the pretense that had poisoned the night. The softness of the velvet cushion beneath us felt emblematic of the comfort we'd built in our modest Savannah apartment, far removed from this ballroom of fragile crystal and glittering chandeliers. Eventually Callum returned, wiping his forehead. I've halted the major sponsors. The catering contract is cancelled, but under terms that won't incur penalties. The venue manager is backing us up. They knew something felt off. I exhaled, relief flooding through me. You're incredible. He gave me a tight smile. That's what family is for. Together we guided Sofia back into the ballroom, just long enough to retrieve our coats and personal belongings. Many of the guests were already making their exits, some slinking away quietly, others clutching coats and muttering apologies. As we crossed the threshold into the lobby, I felt the humid New Orleans night air wrap around us like a soft blanket. Porters wheeled carts piled with half-eaten desserts. A lone trumpet player in the corner played a mournful jazz riff, as if lamenting the collapse of illusions. I lifted Sofia into my arms. She yawned, exhaustion mixing with relief. Can we go home now? She asked, voice small. Absolutely, I whispered, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Let's go home. Stepping outside the Grand Hotel, we hailed a cab. I buckled Sofia into her seat, her little blazer rumpled, her bow tie slightly askew, an image of resilience rather than pretense. As the taxi pulled away, I glanced back at the glowing marquee of the hotel, knowing that within its gilded walls an artificial world had been stripped bare by one brave child and a brother's unwavering support. That night, the real celebration awaited us, not in chandeliers or catered buffets, but in the truth we carried with us, shining more brightly than any chandelier could ever glow. The cab ride back to Savannah was a quiet one. Sofia, clutching her favorite plush raccoon, drifted into sleep with her head resting against the cool window pane. I watched the neon signs of New Orleans fade into the dark highway, feeling the tension of the evening melt away with each passing mile. By the time the city lights of Savannah appeared on the horizon, her breathing was steady, and her small hand curled around my finger. We arrived home shortly before dawn. I carried Sofia into her bedroom, careful not to wake her completely. Her mismatched slippers dangled off one foot as she turned on her side, murmuring, "Truth is stronger than diamonds, right, Uncle Adrian?" I pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Right," I whispered. "Good night, sweetheart." Back in the living room, I sat on the edge of the couch, surveying the quiet clutter of my modest apartment, stacks of graphic novels on the coffee table, pastel sketches pinned to the bulletin board, and the half-empty mug of cold tea I'd forgotten hours ago. My phone buzzed on the side table, a message from Callum, one from Tristan, and a missed email notification from the gallery that carried my first solo exhibit. I sank into the couch, exhaustion tugging at my limbs, but my mind raced with the implications of the night. Ilara's betrayal had exposed not only her own greed, but also the unspoken values of everyone who'd silently cheered her on. Yet, in that ruined gala, I had seen something else, the fierce power of truth, magnified by a child's honesty and fueled by a brother's loyalty. The morning sun peered through the blinds, and I realized I needed coffee. I padded into the kitchen, started the brewer, and sat at the table with the crumpled fundraiser receipt still in my pocket. My thoughts turned to the week ahead, messages to reporters, calls to maintain my niece's privacy, and countless conversations that would stem from the scandal. There was no turning back. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of clarity and purpose. When Callum called mid-morning, I answered on the third ring. "How are you holding up?" I asked, hearing the fatigue in his voice. He sighed. "Better than I deserve. I spent half the night negotiating refunds and damage control. But I've got good news. Beaumont Events LLC has been blacklisted by all major charity networks in Louisiana, and I pulled my firm's quiet endorsements too. The board is looking for new leadership." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I'm proud of you." "I'm glad we have that family dinner on Sunday," he said. "Feels like we need to remind Mom and Dad where their loyalties should lie." I smiled at the thought of our bayou-style Sunday gatherings. "Agreed. Let's make it a feast. Gumbo, cornbread, pecan pie." "Perfect," he said, warmth infusing his tone. "And I'll bring Tristan. He's eager to see how you translate all this into your art." We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, feeling a renewed sense of connection. My brother and I, once two adventurous kids chasing fireflies, were rebuilding our bond on trust and mutual respect. Later that afternoon, I opened my email to find an interview request from a national arts magazine. They'd seen the footage of Sofia's courageous moment and wanted to feature our story. I hesitated, protective as always, but then thought of Sofia's own words. Truth is stronger than diamonds. Perhaps sharing our experience could inspire others, reminding everyone that honesty and integrity shine brighter than any jewel. I replied, tentatively agreeing to an interview, and then turned my attention to Tristan's message. He suggested a collaboration, transforming the gala scandal into a short, graphic novel-style comic for a web release. The idea thrilled me, combining my passion for storytelling with the raw authenticity of real events. I messaged back, proposing we meet at my studio that evening. By sunset, the cool savannah breeze drifted through the open windows as Tristan arrived, sketchbook in hand. He greeted Sofia as she did her homework at the kitchen table, praising her art. She beamed, eager to share her drawings of bayou adventures. I poured 3 glasses of iced tea and sat between them, excitement crackling in the air. As we brainstormed panels, shadowy chandeliers, fluttering sashes, the aftermath of truth revealed, I realized how far we'd come. A year ago, I would have recoiled from public attention. Now, I embraced it as a platform for authenticity. That night, as I tucked Sofia into bed once more, she looked up at me. "Will people understand why we did it?" she asked, her voice sleepy. "I think they will," I replied, brushing a curl from her forehead. "Your honesty, our honesty, will remind them what really matters." She nodded and closed her eyes, smiling. In the quiet of my study, I flipped open a blank sketchpad. The events of the gala began to pour out in pencil strokes, a child's brave stance on a grand stage, a family's reckoning, and the phoenix-like rise of integrity from the ashes of deception. As the first panel took shape, I felt the weight of that satin sash fall away, replaced by the freedom to create a story rooted in truth, one that Sofia and I would share with the world, together. The days that followed settled into a rhythm of quiet rebuilding. Monday morning found me in my sunlit studio, sketching out the first pages of our gala-inspired comic. The pencils traced the arc of Sofia's brave stand and my brother's steadfast support, real events transmuted into black and white panels, each stroke a testament to truth's power. Tristan hovered over my shoulder, offering layout suggestions and marveling at how a single child's honesty could topple an empire of pretense. By Tuesday, I'd arranged for a small gallery showing in Savannah's art district. The walls would display not only finished pages of the graphic short story, but also original sketches of the bayou treehouses where Callum and I first learned courage and loyalty. The curator, impressed by the gallery's website video of Sofia on stage, agreed to waive the usual commission in gratitude for such an authentic narrative. Meanwhile, my parents drove down from Louisiana, their Honda rattling over the bridge into town. I met them at the coffee cart outside the gallery. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, her well-coiffed hair slightly mussed, evidence of late-night tears. My father looked ill at ease, shifting from foot to foot. They both carried wrapped biscuits in a Tupperware container, my childhood favourite, pecan praline cookies.
"Adrian," my mother began, voice trembling, we're so sorry." She handed me the container as if offering peace through confectionery. My father cleared his throat. "We shouldn't have let Ilara's ambition blind us to your worth."
We heard the interview, you and Sofia. You were so poised. I met their gaze, feeling the residual ache of old wounds. What matters, I said softly, is that we move forward. Family dinner's still on for Sunday? They exchanged a relieved look.
"Absolutely," my father said. "We'll bring gumbo pots and cornbread and sweets." My mother nodded, her eyes shining. "And no more pretense." That afternoon, I stopped by Sofia's school to speak with her teacher, Mrs.
Lambert, about bullying prevention. The teacher thanked me for setting such a strong example and invited me to speak at the Character Education Assembly. I agreed, feeling a surge of pride. My niece's courage was already inspiring others. Wednesday morning, I found a letter slipped under my door, an invitation to present our story at a regional comics conference in Charleston. The organizer wrote that she had seen the viral clip of Sofia on social media and believed our narrative would resonate across the Southeast. I called Tristan immediately, his excitement matching mine as we outlined a presentation combining live sketching with recorded interviews. By Thursday evening, Callum stopped by my apartment unannounced, holding 2 steaming cups of matcha lattes. He smiled easily as ever, slipping onto the couch. "You ready for Sunday?" he asked. I sipped and nodded. "I am."
"And I've got something special." I rose and retrieved the framed guestbook entry. Sofia's neat scrawl listing every name from the gala, each crossed out with a red pen to symbolize the end of pretense.
"I thought we could hang this in the dining room," I said, offering it to him. He took it gently. "Perfect," he agreed, eyes brimming. "Let's show everyone that honesty belongs at our table." Friday dawned bright, and I spent the day finalizing the comic's first draft, then teaching Sofia a simple coloring technique in watercolor pencils. She giggled as her hand shook with excitement, transforming stark ink lines into vibrant scenes. "We make a good team," she said, wiping a stray smudge from her cheek. On Saturday, I delivered the comic pages to the gallery. The curator had already printed banners quoting Sofia's line, "That's generosity. That's deception." In the center, a life-size cutout of Sofia's image, microphone in hand, determined gaze ahead, stood sentinel over a row of signed event invitations framed like historical documents. That evening, my parents and Callum joined me for a quiet family meal at my kitchen table. The aroma of gumbo filled the air, and the praline cookies sat temptingly on a small plate. We laughed over old stories, canoe trips, midnight fishing escapades, and childhood pranks. My mother reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "We needed this wake-up call," she said. My father nodded, eyes misty. "We love you both so much." Sofia finished her homework at the counter, then bounded over to collect hugs from everyone. "I'm glad honesty won," she declared. We cheered her proclamation, raising spoons of spicy gumbo in a toast. Later, as I tucked Sofia into bed, her room now adorned with sketches from the comic, I reflected on the past week's whirlwind. A ruined gala, a viral moment of truth, a flurry of creative opportunities, and a family rediscovered. The tapestry of my life, once strained by silent judgment, had been rewoven with threads of integrity and love. Before switching off the light, I whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, kiddo, for reminding us what really matters." She gave a sleepy nod, clutching her raccoon tight and murmuring, "Truth is our strongest legacy." As I stepped into the hall, I realized that our story, told in ink, in memory, and in everyday gestures, would continue to unfold, reminding us always that the simplest truths shine brightest, even amid the most elaborate illusions. The week had barely warmed into late spring when I found myself on a small stage at Savannah's public library, invited to speak at the Character Education Assembly alongside Sofia. The meeting room, usually filled with muted whispers and shuffling chairs, buzzed with anticipatory energy. Rows of second and third graders sat on the floor, legs crossed, eyes wide as they took in the event posters. Courage in everyday life, and truth matters most. I guided Sofia onto the stage first, her hand firmly in mine. She wore a simple blue dress now, no satin ribbons, her hair in two playful pigtails. The children erupted in applause. I felt a swell of pride that surpassed any gallery showing or Comic-Con invitation. Tonight, we were here not as contestants in a glittering spectacle, but as living examples of integrity and bravery. The librarian, Mrs. Owens, introduced us with warmth. Today we have a special guest, Ms. Sofia and her uncle, Mr.
Adrian Cole, whose recent act of courage reminds us that honesty can move mountains. She smiled over her glasses, then stepped aside. I knelt down so I was eye level with the children.
Hey everyone, I began quietly, then raised my voice so every child could hear. A few weeks ago, my niece and I were at a very fancy family party. Some adults thought family meant having fun and looking good, but they forgot what really matters. I nodded to Sofia. Sofia spoke up when she saw something unfair, something that hurt people who needed help. She told the truth, even though it was scary. The children were silent, leaning forward. I watched as a few little hands went up for questions. A boy in the front row asked, "Wasn't it scary to tell so many grown-ups at once?" Sofia took the microphone. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "But I knew telling the truth would help fix it. It was the right thing to do." One little girl in glasses whispered, "My teacher says honesty is the best policy." The boy next to her, sporting missing front teeth, asked, "But what if telling the truth hurts someone's feelings?" I exchanged a look with Sofia and answered together, "Sometimes truth does hurt feelings, but it also heals in the long run. It gives people a chance to fix mistakes." After the Q&A, we read aloud the first 2 pages of our comic story, projecting the panels onto a screen. The children giggled at the exaggerated caricature of the influencer in her sequin dress, winced at the moment Ilara delivered her biting toast, and cheered when Sofia's speech silenced the hall. As the final panel, where Callum lifts Sofia's hand in victory, appeared, the room erupted in enthusiastic applause. Later, offstage, a shy boy named Matteo tugged on my sleeve.
"Uncle Adrian," he said in a small voice. "My big sister is always mean to me, and no one else sees it. Do you think I could tell the truth like you did?" I knelt down, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Yes, Matteo.
Telling the truth can be hard when the other person is powerful, but you can find someone you trust, maybe a teacher or a friend, and share what's really happening. You never have to face it alone." His eyes brightened. "Thank you." Then he scampered back to his seat. Back home that evening, Sofia and I relaxed on the porch with iced lemonade. The crickets chirped softly and the sky bled pink and orange. "Did you like talking to all those kids?" I asked. She nodded thoughtfully. "They asked really good questions. I think they'll remember to be honest when it matters." I hugged her close. "You taught them more than I ever could." Over the next few days, the local newspaper ran a feature. Bayou-born heroine, 7-year-old sparks conversation on truth. The article highlighted our library talk, complete with photographs of Sofia, Tsichai, her blue dress and me gesturing to the comic panels. I noticed families stopping by the gallery to view the exhibit, parents and children pointing at the cutout of Sofia on stage, replicas of her red pen across the guestbook entries, and the framed panels of our story. My inbox filled with emails, offers to speak at summer camps, requests from school districts, and a handwritten letter from a woman in Charleston who shared how her own son had been bullied and that our story gave him the courage to stand up
himself.
As I read her note, Sofia curled up beside me, exhausted but content, and I realized something important. Our story had grown beyond the walls of that once oppressive ballroom. It had become a catalyst for broader conversations about integrity, compassion, and the power of a single voice to instigate change. That Sunday, our family dinner around the old bayou table in my parents' backyard felt richer than ever. The marsh lights blinked in the distance, and the kettle gurgled on the wood stove. My mother ladled out gumbo as my father refilled everyone's iced tea. Callum toasted to truth, and to the bravest storyteller I know. He raised his glass to Sofia, who beamed, her eyes shining brighter than any chandelier. As fireflies drifted over the water's edge, I thought of the next chapter in our journey. The comic would go into wider print this autumn, we'd speak at conferences, and I would continue writing, always guided by the knowledge that stories grounded in honesty carry the truest magic.
And at the center of it all would be my niece, her small hand firmly clasped in mine, reminding the world that even the youngest among us can wield the greatest power, the power of truth.
The morning after our library appearance, I settled into my drafting table, determined to refine the comic's next chapters. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating stacks of sketch pads, ink pens, and scattered coffee mugs. Tristan arrived soon after, carrying a portfolio of architectural renderings that he'd transformed into digital storyboard layouts. Together, we mapped out how to depict the deepening bonds between Sofia, Callum, and me. How the treehouse in the bayou evolved into a symbol of our enduring support for one another. By late afternoon, I paused to check my phone. A confirmation email glowed on the screen. The Southeastern Comics Conference in Charleston had accepted our presentation proposal. They wanted us to deliver a live behind-the-scenes look at creating Child of the Bayou, our graphic short story, complete with real-time sketching and a Q&A session. My chest swelled with excitement and nerves. I'd never spoken at a conference of that scale, much less with my 7-year-old niece by my side. Still, I thought of the confident way Sofia had addressed dozens of schoolchildren just days ago. If she could stand before that assembly hall, she could face any conference crowd. I sent Tristan a triumphant text, "Charleston is on." His reply came almost instantly, "Let's make it unforgettable." That evening, I joined Callum for a late-night dinner at the Savannah Spoon, our favorite waterfront cafe. Summer breeze carried the faint scent of magnolias as we shared a bowl of gumbo and toasted iced teas. I told him about the conference, and his grin was as bright as the moonlight bouncing off the river. "You're going to knock their socks off," he assured me, "and Sofia will be the star." I laughed, recalling the flurry of media attention her moment of truth had sparked. "She already is a star," I said, "but stars need a stage. Charleston might just be ours." On Saturday, we packed the car with canvases, display boards, framed comic pages, and our presentation gear. Sofia insisted on carrying her own pencil case, beaming like it was her prized treasure. As we drove the 2 hours north along scenic coastal roads, marshland glinting in the sun, I reflected on how far we'd come, from an ignominious gala to becoming advocates for honesty and creativity. Arriving at the Charleston Conference Center, we were greeted by friendly volunteers who guided us to the Family Stories track. The room, lined with booths showcasing independent illustrators and small press publishers, buzzed with low conversations and the tapping of laptops. We set up our display, a life-size cutout of Sofia holding her signature mic, framed guestbook pages marked by her red pen, and mounted panels of our story's pivotal moments. When our session time arrived, I led Sofia to the front as families and fellow creators filled the seats. I introduced us and the origins of Child of the Bayou, then handed the mic to Sofia. "Hello," she began, fearless and clear. "I once spoke up when adults forgot what mattered. This story shows how truth and love can change everything." The audience erupted in applause, and as I watched her tiny form shine under the spotlights, my heart soared. We dove into the presentation, me sketching live, panels appearing from blank pages, Tristan modulating slides, Sofia chiming in with observations on character design. Parents whispered to children, "Look, she's only 7." Children watched wide-eyed as she described her inspirations. Questions flew. How did you find the courage? Can I draw my own hero? Sofia answered them all, her voice steady, encouraging each young artist. Afterwards, dozens lined up for autographs, copies of the comic I'd printed on demand, each personalized with a tiny sketch of Sofia's raccoon. Conference organizers pressed gift bags into our hands, sponsors who pledged to fund upcoming print runs, a children's literacy non-profit that invited us to visit schools statewide, and an offer from a small publisher keen to expand our short story into a full-length graphic novel. That evening, over seafood dinner on a brick-paved street in Charleston's historic district, I toasted Santiago, a local editor who'd invited us to contribute to an anthology of true story comics. To collaboration, I said, lifting my glass. Sofia grinned at me from across the table, her eyes sparkling like fireflies over the marsh. Driving back to Savannah late that night, Sofia curled asleep in her booster seat. I reflected on the day's whirlwind. We had moved from personal vindication to public inspiration, and I realized our journey was not just about exposing deception, but about empowering others to speak their truths through art and storytelling. By the time we pulled into our driveway, the first light of dawn was just touching the horizon. I carried Sofia into her bed, her small hand unclasped mine, only when she was safe beneath the covers. As I stepped into the living room, exhaustion and exhilaration mingled, and I realized our story was evolving beyond us, reaching into countless hearts and sparking conversations about courage, integrity, and creativity. Coffee brewing in the kitchen, I opened my sketchbook and began a new page, one that would capture the magic of our Charleston debut, the audience's awed faces, the promise of future collaborations. With each pencil stroke, I felt anchored by the bayou's lessons, that the simplest truths carry the greatest power, and that a child's honest voice can illuminate the darkest corners of any grand hall. The next chapter beckoned, and this time I knew we were ready. The days after Charleston buzzed with a new kind of momentum. My inbox overflowed with invitations, guest lectures at elementary schools, requests for comic signings at independent bookshops, and emails from parents who said their children were inspired to speak up in tough situations. I found myself waking before dawn, an unusual habit for a night owl, eager to sketch the next pages of our story and reply to every message. On Monday morning, I guided Sofia into her art class at the community center. Her classmates clustered around her as soon as she stepped in, pressing her newly published comic into my hands. "Will you sign this for me?" they asked, pencils poised. She carefully drew a tiny raccoon sketch beside her name, then returned to her easel to paint a landscape of sunlit marsh grasses. I watched her with pride. Even in her young age, she had learned to balance the spotlight with quiet focus. Back in my studio, I unfurled large sheets of Bristol board and began penciling the next chapter of Child of the Bayou. This segment would explore the aftermath of our conference, how truth rippled outward, affecting our community and beyond. I started with a 2-page spread of the conference hall, families leaning forward, eyes alight with wonder, children clutching sketchbooks as we signed prints. In the margins, I added speech bubbles quoting parents who whispered, "I can't wait to tell my kids that honesty matters." And she's my new hero. By lunchtime, Tristan arrived with a fresh cup of coffee and news. The regional public radio station wanted to interview us for their morning segment. They'd heard about our assembly talk and Charleston debut, and they wanted to discuss how art could serve as a vehicle for ethical lessons. We scheduled the live interview for Wednesday, which meant another early rise and platform polishing. That evening, the three of us, myself, Sofia and Tristan, gathered around the kitchen table to storyboard the radio segment. I sketched simple frames to accompany the audio, Sofia speaking into a microphone, families listening raptly, a close-up of the comics panels. We discussed sound effects, gentle bayou crickets, the soft lilt of a trumpet, to give the piece a sense of place. I watched Sofia's eyes light up as she suggested she could record her own narration in the studio. "That would be so cool," she said. her voice brimming with excitement. On Wednesday at dawn, we piled into Callum's SUV for the drive to the public radio studio. He insisted on coming along to lend moral support. Inside the radio building, the sound engineer greeted us warmly and showed us to the studio booth. 2 microphones, acoustic foam on the walls, and a large window overlooking the control room. Sofia perched on a padded stool, her legs swinging as she adjusted her headphones to fit. When the red light blinked on, we began. The host, a smooth-voiced journalist named Marisol, introduced us. Today on Bayou Mornings we have graphic novelist Adrian Cole and his remarkable young niece, Sofia, whose act of courageous storytelling has resonated across the region. She turned to Sofia first. Sofia, can you tell our listeners what inspired you to speak up at that family gala? Sofia took a deep breath, then recounted the story in her clear, earnest tone. Seeing the false charity envelopes, understanding that promises should mean action, and deciding that the only way to help real children was to expose the lies. I watched her from the corner of my eye, struck by how poised she was, how her small voice carried the weight of her convictions. Next, Marisol asked me role-playing questions, how I felt when Sofia asked me to tell the room the truth, how our family had rallied afterward, and what lessons we hoped others would take from our experience. I described the importance of modeling honesty for young people, of using art not just for entertainment, but as a medium for moral education. We discussed the upcoming comic launch, the school visits planned for the summer, and the anthology invitation from Charleston. When the segment ended, Marisol thanked us. Adrian, Sofia, thank you for reminding us that courage comes in all sizes and that truth, like art, has the power to transform. As the red light went off, I hugged Sofia, whose grin was as bright as a sunburst over the marsh. By Thursday afternoon, advance orders for Child of the Bayou topped 2,000 copies. The small press I'd partnered with scrambled to increase the print run, and bookstores along the East Coast requested author signings. Local news outlets ran follow-up stories, interviews, video clips of the library talk, and feature articles on the movement of family storytelling for moral development. Amid this whirlwind, I carved out Friday evening for a quiet visit to the bayou near my parents' home. Callum drove us to the old treehouse where our childhood adventures had begun. We climbed the wooden ladder, Sofia riding on my shoulders, her laughter echoing among the cypress knees. From our perch, we watched the water shimmer in the dying light. I unfolded my sketchbook and drew the treehouse's silhouette against the sky, adding small figures of us standing guard, symbols of protection, unity, and the power of truth. That night, as I tucked Sofia into bed, she clutched her raccoon and murmured, "Tomorrow, I get to read to the first graders." I smiled, brushing her hair back. "Yes, you will."
And I'll be right there with you. In the soft glow of her nightlight, I realized our journey had taken on a life of its own, one that began with a shattered anniversary gala and blossomed into a broader mission: to remind the world that even the
smallest voices, when spoken boldly, can change hearts and shape a more honest tomorrow. By Saturday morning, the first box of printed copies arrived at my door. 2,000 glossy volumes of Child of the Bayou, each one bearing Sofia's courageous declaration on the cover. Truth is stronger than diamonds. I carried a stack into the living room where Sofia was building a fortress of stuffed animals around her raccoon puppet. "Want to see?" I asked, handing her a copy. She beamed and flipped through the pages, stopping to proclaim each panel her favorite. "That's me, and here's Uncle Callum," she pointed. "And here's me helping you sketch the trees." I hugged her, feeling the pride swirl warm and bright. "You did this, kiddo, every bit of it." That afternoon, I set up at Books and Beans, Savannah's coziest independent bookstore, for a signing event. Rows of hardcover copies lined the table, and the staff had brewed fresh coffee and iced tea for guests. A small crowd gathered, families with children clutching blank sketchbooks, young artists eager for a drawing, and parents who introduced themselves with gratitude for our story's message. When my turn came, I sat down with a pen in hand. The first person in line was a young woman holding her toddler daughter. The girl held out a copy timidly. "Could Sofia draw a little friend for her?" the mother asked. I smiled at Sofia, who was perched on a stool beside me. Without hesitation, Sofia sketched a tiny raccoon beside the toddler's name on the title page. The child giggled, and the mother's eyes welled up. Next came a group of middle schoolers from the local youth centre. They'd heard about our library talk and travelled by bus to meet us. "Can you sign for all of us?" one asked, handing me 5 copies. I personalised each with a short message. "Stay brave. Keep drawing truth. Your voice matters. Never stop speaking up. And art saves the day." Sofia added her own, "Always be honest," in her neat handwriting. As the afternoon sun waned, the line dwindled until only a few remained. Friends, neighbours, and then Callum, arriving last with a proud smile. He placed a copy on the table. "For me?" I teased. "For us," he replied. "Thank you for showing me and everyone what family really means." That evening, as the bookstore cleared, I packed the remaining books into neatly labelled boxes for shipment to other stores. Sofia reorganised my pens and markers with solemn care, as though preparing for our next big project. Back home, we celebrated with homemade pizza and fresh lemonade on the porch swing. Fireflies blinked in the garden, and the night hummed with cicadas. Sofia rested her head on my shoulder. "What's next, Uncle Adrian?" I gazed at the horizon, where the first stars were appearing. "Next," I said softly, "we keep telling stories, stories that remind people of kindness, honesty, and courage, and we do it together." She smiled sleepily, her eyelids fluttering. "Together," she whispered, before drifting off. That night, I sat at my drafting table under the soft glow of a desk lamp and began penciling the opening pages of our next adventure, a new graphic novel that would follow a young heroine inspired by Sofia navigating her own trials with truth as her guide. As each line appeared on the crisp page, I realized that this journey, beginning with a crumbling anniversary gala and leading to conferences, library assemblies, and bookstore signings, had become far more than a personal vindication. It had blossomed into a shared mission to give voice to integrity and prove that even the smallest storyteller can change the world, one honest word at a time. Monday dawned grey and drizzly, an unexpected gift for Savannah's drought-stricken gardens. I brewed a pot of dark roast coffee and sat at my drafting table, reviewing pages of the new graphic novel while Sofia finished breakfast across the room. Today was our first scheduled school visit. Maplewood Elementary, 15 minutes from our house. The school's principal had invited us to address every third-grade classroom, encouraging students to create their own heroes through truth and creativity. By 9:30, we pulled into the school's circular drive. Maplewood's red brick building rose behind a row of flowering crepe myrtles. I carried my messenger bag loaded with ink pens and souvenir comics. Sofia toted a small backpack filled with coloured pencils. Hand in hand, we walked past a bulletin board announcing "Author Visit Today" in bold letters. In the multi-purpose room, 300 eager faces turned upward as we entered. The cafeteria tables had been pushed aside, chairs arranged theatre-style. Smiles spread across children's faces. Some held copies of Child of the Bayou, others clutched blank notebooks, ready to become their own storytellers. Principal Harris greeted us at the front, her enthusiasm bright despite the rain. "Mr. Cole, Sofia, thank you for joining us. We've been talking about ethics in class, and your story perfectly illustrates how honesty and empathy shape our community." I nodded, stepping forward. "Thank you for inviting us. Today, Sofia and I want to show you how art and truth go hand in hand." The children applauded. I began with a short slideshow of our first panels, Ilara's empty charity envelopes, Sofia's decision to speak up, Callum's unwavering support. Sofia stood by the projector, pointing out details. "See how Aunt Ilara's eyes flick away? That shows she doesn't feel proud." The students leaned forward, absorbing every nuance. Next, Tristan joined us via video link from his Dallas studio, beaming waves. He explained how his architectural training helped design layouts that guided readers through the narrative. Then the three of us showcased a quick live drawing demonstration. I sketched a marsh treehouse, Tristan layered digital backgrounds, and Sofia colored in glowing fireflies at dusk. The children gasped as the scene came alive in vivid hues. Then came the moment I love most, workshop time. Each child received a 2-page spread of blank comics. I instructed them to draw a character who faces a difficult choice and decides to tell the truth, even if it's hard. Sofia knelt among them, offering pointers. Think about what your character feels. Use speech bubbles to show their thoughts. Laughter and quiet concentration filled the room as the future storytellers tackled their panels with determination. 45 minutes later, the room buzzed with creative energy. Students held up their comics, a shy boy whose robot tells on a classmate who cheated, a young girl who admits she broke her neighbor's window, a superhero who reveals a hiding spot to rescue trapped puppies. Principal Harris beamed as we collected the drawings, promising to display them in the hallway gallery. On our way out, a mother paused me at the door. Mr. Cole, my son has always been too shy to speak up, but today he said he's going to tell the truth next time he sees someone being excluded. Thank you, I smiled, my heart full. Back in the car, the rain had turned to a steady drizzle, and Sofia rubbed sleep from her eyes. That was fun, she murmured. Do you think my comics will help someone else? I braked at a stop sign and turned to her. Absolutely. Each comic is a promise, to yourself and to others, that truth matters. Today, you inspired nearly 300 classmates to be brave. Later that afternoon, I returned to my studio to find a large envelope from the Savannah Arts Council. Inside was an invitation to design a community mural on a school building. The theme, truth and storytelling. The council wanted to collaborate with local artists and youth to paint a mural incorporating scenes from Child of the Bayou alongside
original creations by Maplewood students.
I called Principal Harris, who was thrilled. This will be a living legacy, she said. Over the next week, I assembled a small team, Tristan handling digital templates, an art teacher from Maplewood arranging student contributions, and a local muralist named Jasmine who volunteered her spray paint expertise. We scheduled evening sessions, gathering under floodlights at the school's exterior wall. Sofia worked side by side with classmates, her raccoon puppet perched nearby for inspiration. She sketched firefly clusters glowing over the marsh, while other students drew their hero characters beneath the treehouse. Parents joined in, painting backgrounds of sunrise and river reflections. Day by day, the wall transformed, a sprawling tableau of marsh grasses, child-made comic panels, and the bold title, Where Truth Grows, arcing across the top. Callum stopped by with his startup team to lend a hand, rolling paint, cleaning brushes, and offering high fives to every little artist. Even my parents dropped in, my mother carefully painting a distant cypress silhouette, while my father spread a protective varnish coat. By the end of the month, the mural stood complete, a vivid testament to the power of collective storytelling and honesty. Local news covered the unveiling ceremony. Sofia cut the ceremonial ribbon, her eyes shining brighter than the freshly painted hues. I watched as she addressed the crowd. Truth is our seed. We plant it together, we grow. A better world, applause thundered. That evening, as we packed up our supplies for the last time, I realized this chapter of our journey had come full circle. From a single act of truth at a glittering gala to hundreds of children finding their voices, from a graphic novel to a living mural, our story had woven itself into the very fabric of our community. And at the heart of it all was a little girl who dared to speak the truth, and an uncle who believed in her every word. Spring settled into early summer with golden afternoons drifting lazily through the Spanish moss, and our lives continued to brim with creative momentum. The mural at Maplewood Elementary, Where Truth Grows, had become a local landmark, drawing families for photos and inspiring a handful of neighborhood art clubs. Yet, even as I juggled mural commissions and speaking engagements, my heart remained anchored by one constant: the quiet joy of watching Sofia learn and grow. On a humid Tuesday morning, I escorted her to school's summer art program, a special session hosted by the Savannah Arts Council in partnership with local illustrators. We arrived at the air-conditioned community center just as a ceiling fan kicked on with a soft hum. The room buzzed with chatter as nearly 50 budding artists unpacked sketchbooks and paints at long folding tables. "Sofia," called Ms. Ramirez, the program coordinator, beaming. "The mural has inspired us all. Today we want you to help lead a workshop on character development." Sofia's cheeks flushed. She straightened in her seat, adjusting her paint-splattered overalls.
"I'd love to," she replied, voice brimming with determination.
I watched proudly as she took the lead, guiding small teams to imagine heroes who upheld honesty in various scenarios. A park ranger protecting endangered turtles, a bus driver admitting a route mistake and finding a detour to save a stranded student, and a role reversal panel featuring an adult apologizing to a child for a broken promise. Each group sketched, inked, and colored under Sofia's gentle direction. I circulated among the tables, offering tips on perspective and composition, but it was Sofia's genuine encouragement that drew the brightest smiles. After a 2-hour workshop, the children's creations were mounted in a pop-up gallery, their panels forming a kaleidoscope of empathy and integrity. One little boy shyly presented me his drawing, a girl returning a lost wallet full of summer job money. "I want to be like her," he mumbled. I knelt to his level. "You already are," I said. "Every time we make the hard choice, we plant seeds of trust." That afternoon, I returned to my studio to finish the final chapter of Child of the Bayou, in which our protagonists celebrated the mural's completion. I sketched the closing pages, Sofia, Adrian, and Callum standing before the newly painted wall, hand in hand, as neighbors and friends gathered around them. The last panel, framed by firefly light, contained only 3 words, scripted in Sofia's handwriting: "Truth lights the way." With the manuscript complete, I emailed the file to our publisher, along with a heartfelt note. "Thank you for believing in a 7-year-old heroine and her graphic novel uncle. Together, we'll remind the world how brightly truth can shine." By week's end, the regional bookmobile tour rolled into town, a colourful bus stocked with children's literature, visiting parks and rec centres. The Arts Council arranged for Child of the Bayou to be featured on the top shelf, and they invited Sofia and me aboard for story time. We climbed the bus steps and found a semicircle of beanbag chairs where 30 wide-eyed kids awaited. I began with the first panels, reading the narration aloud while weaving in commentary about the marsh, the treehouse, and the value of honesty. Sofia chimed in, naming her favorite illustrations, pointing out small details like the raccoon's mischievous grin. Afterward, the children lined up for copies and sketches, giggling as they received personalized raccoon doodles. As the bookmobile departed for its next stop, drivers honked and waved. I waved back, a lump of gratefulness rising in my throat. In a short time, our little story had danced through libraries, schools, bookstores, conferences, murals, and even a moving van, spreading seeds of courage and compassion wherever it roamed. That evening, Callum joined us for dinner on the screened-in porch, grilled catfish, hush puppies, and a green salad from our garden. Fireflies flitted overhead as we ate by lantern light. I watched Sofia laugh at her father's clumsy attempt to shuck corn and felt an overwhelming sense of contentment. Our family, once fractured by pride and pretense, had rediscovered its roots in honesty and support. Later, I tucked Sofia into bed. She hugged me tight. "Uncle Adrian," she whispered, "what's our next story?" I smiled, smoothing back her curls. "That's up to you," I said. "Wherever your imagination leads, and wherever the truth needs telling, we'll be there." She closed her eyes, a serene smile on her lips. Turning off her nightlight, I returned to my study. The moonlight filtered through the shutters, illuminating the stack of freshly printed Child of the Bayou on my desk. Beside it lay a blank sketch pad for our next adventure. I picked up a pencil and sketched the first tentative line, knowing that, as always, the greatest stories begin when we dare to speak our truth and follow it into the unknown. Summer ripened into early August, and our days settled into a comforting routine of creativity and community. Each morning, Sofia bounded downstairs with fresh story ideas swirling in her head, and I turned them into penciled thumbnails on pages that awaited her colored input. By midweek, our little story factory had grown into a lively collaboration. Drafts of a new graphic novel series spread across the dining table, while our living room walls were adorned with concept sketches, post-it notes, and children's workshop drawings. On Thursday, I received an unexpected invitation. The Savannah Children's Festival, a weekend-long celebration of art, music, and literature in Forsyth Park, wanted Child of the Bayou as their featured story at the Storytelling Pavilion. They asked if Sofia and I could host live drawing sessions, read aloud from the comic, and lead a create-your-own-hero workshop. I glanced at Sofia, who grinned so wide her freckles seemed to sparkle. "Let's do it," I said, and her nod was immediate and enthusiastic. By Saturday morning, we set up beneath a broad live oak, its canopy draped in Spanish moss. The storytelling pavilion stage was a simple wooden deck, festooned with banners featuring fireflies and cypress silhouettes. Volunteers handed out free copies of Child of the Bayou and packs of colored pencils to eager children. A gentle breeze carried laughter and the scent of jasmine from nearby gardens. Our first session began with a reading. I narrated the opening panels, Adrian and Sofia arriving at the gala, the hush that fell when the truth came out. Sofia sat beside me, holding up each page so everyone could see the crisp ink and vibrant watercolors. She chimed in on sound effects, click-click of the sequin heels, and quietly corrected me when I mispronounced cypress. Next, we demoed live drawing. I sketched the outline of the familiar treehouse, while Sofia added tiny details, shuttered windows, a coiled rope ladder, firefly lanterns dangling from the rafters. Children gasped when the frame sprang to life under her swift, confident strokes. After a brief break for lemonade and Gullah peach cobbler, the Create Your Own Hero workshop commenced. Dozens of children formed small teams, each brainstorming a character who embodied honesty and kindness. One group designed Marina the Marsh Detective, a girl in waders who solved mysteries of missing turtle nests. Another sketched Captain Coral, a boy in a wetsuit who defended sea life from pollution. Sofia hovered among them, offering gentle guidance. What makes your hero brave? How will they show honesty? By late afternoon, the pavilion was alive with colorful comic strips taped to makeshift easels. Families strolled by, stopping to admire the fresh talent on display. A local reporter filmed short interviews. How did you come up with your hero? Why is truth important? What do you hope people learn? The children's answers were earnest and unfiltered, underscoring the festival's spirit of discovery and
integrity.
As the sun dipped low, we gathered for a final group photo. Adrian, Sofia, festival organizers, and smiling young artists clustered in front of our mural-inspired banner reading Storytellers of Tomorrow. The applause that erupted felt less performative than in any gala or conference. It was genuine, warm, and unguarded. On the drive home, Sofia dozed against the car window, clutching her collection of new hero sketches. I glanced at her peaceful face, marveling at how her simple act of truth had burgeoned into a movement, a wave of stories, workshops, and public art that would continue long after summer waned. That night, I reflected on the arc of our journey, from a glittering ballroom of false promises to a community park pulsing with authentic creativity. We had shown that courage and honesty could spark imaginations, build connections, and inspire even the shyest voices to speak out. And as Sofia slept soundly, I knew our next chapter awaited, one where truth would guide us into new adventures, each drawn in ink, fueled by heart, and shared with anyone ready to listen. Autumn arrived with a soft hush of falling leaves, painting Savannah's streets in gold and auburn. Our mural at Maplewood Elementary glowed beneath the season's light, but our own next chapter beckoned, a collaboration with the regional theatre company. They planned a staged reading of Child of the Bayou, complete with live projection of the comic panels and original music to accompany the narrative. When I first received their invitation, I hesitated. Would the story translate from page to stage? But Sofia's eyes lit up, and I knew the answer. Rehearsals began in late September at the historic Forsyth Theatre. I watched from the back as a cast of 4, 2 children and 2 adults, embodied our characters. A spotlight illuminated the central panel depicting the gala's downward spiral. Actors spoke the lines in our speech bubbles, and behind them, the panels advanced in time with their voices. As the scene reached Sofia's defiant moment at the microphone, the theatre fell silent, every adult and child in the audience holding their breath. When the play concluded, the applause rolled like thunder. Sofia and I took the stage for a Q&A session. A young actor who'd played the influencer character admitted, "I felt horrible delivering those cruel lines. Thank you for letting me see the impact of my words." A child in the front row asked, "Did you ever think the play would happen?" Sofia smiled. "I just kept telling the truth. Then more people believed in it." It felt surreal and magnificent all at once. That weekend, as the temperature dipped, I accompanied Sofia to a local art festival at City Hall. We hosted a pop-up bookstand, and alongside Child of the Bayou, preview pages from our upcoming sequel, tentatively titled Whispers of the Cypress, drew curious glances. In this new story, our heroine would confront rumors that threatened her community, learning once again that truth and empathy can dispel the darkest misunderstandings. By mid-October, the city announced a literacy award ceremony for community champions. When I nominated Sofia and our project, they recognized her with the Young Voices Award, the youngest recipient in the award's history. Standing on the dais in city council chambers, she accepted a medal shaped like an open book, her cheeks flushed with pride. Council members spoke of her courage and her gift for guiding others toward honesty. I couldn't have been prouder. As fall deepened, our family traditions wove new threads. One crisp Sunday, we returned to our bayou treehouse ruin, now reinforced with fresh boards and whimsical lanterns, where my parents joined us for a picnic of gumbo and cornbread. Callum strung holiday lights among the branches, and Sofia declared it our story tree, where every winter we'd gather to share tales of bravery and truth. That evening, I sat at my drafting table to finalize Chapter 14 of Child of the Bayou, capturing the moment the community stood together beneath the mural and treehouse to celebrate their shared values. I sketched families holding hands, children lifting paintbrushes in solidarity, and fireflies dancing above the gathering like tiny beacons of hope. Before bed, Sofia tucked her raccoon puppet beside her and asked, "When will the sequel come out, Uncle Adrian?" I kissed her forehead. "Soon," I promised. "But until then, we'll keep telling our stories, on stage, on pages, and in every heart that's willing to listen." As she drifted to sleep, I realized that our truth-seeking adventure had become more than a personal triumph. It had ignited a community-wide movement. Each chapter, whether sketched in pencil, painted on a wall, or performed under a spotlight, reminded us that, even amid glittering facades, honesty remains our brightest guiding light. And with Sofia as my co-author, I knew our story's best pages were still waiting to be drawn. The first frost of winter had just dusted the streets of Savannah with a hint of sparkle, and our world felt both familiar and newly transformed. Snow was rare in these parts, but the crispness in the air reminded me of the beginnings of our journey, when a single day of honest courage changed everything. Now, as December's glow settled over the bayou town where Callum and I grew up, we prepared for one final celebration of our shared adventure. It began with an invitation to the Savannah Public Library's Year in Stories Gala, where Child of the Bayou and its community collaborations would be honored as the featured local success. This gala was different from Ilara's from 3 years ago. No crystal chandeliers or satin sashes, but warm string lights and bookshelves stacked with donated titles. Teachers, parents, local artists, and even the mayor gathered around tables draped in deep blue linen, each place setting marked with a stack of our comics and a sprig of holly. I walked in with Sofia on my arm, her cheeks rosy from the cold and excitement. She wore a simple red dress, no petticoats, no sequins, just the way she liked it. Callum met us at the entrance, hugging us both as though no time had passed since our childhood treehouse expeditions. My parents came next, my father proudly pinning a Bayou storyteller lapel pin on my coat, my mother accepting one for herself and pressing a kiss to my cheek. When the program began, the library director spoke from the podium. This year, we honor a story that began with a child's earnest question and grew into a movement of truth and artistry. Adrian Cole and Sofia remind us how a single voice can illuminate the darkest corners and inspire us to listen to those who might otherwise go unheard. As the lights dimmed, a video montage played, clips from Ilara's ruined gala, our library, assembly, the Charleston conference, the Maplewood mural, the theatre reading, and our bookmobile stops, all threaded together by Sofia's resolute declaration, "Truth is stronger than diamonds." At the close, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Sofia tugged at my coat. "Uncle Adrian, they're clapping for us." I lifted her onto the podium with me. She looked out at the crowd, young faces eager for their own stories, grandparents nodding with pride, and artists smiling in recognition of our shared craft. And she whispered, "This feels like magic." I handed her the microphone.
"Thank you," she began, voice soft but steady. "Every time someone told the truth, we got closer together. That's how families grow and how communities grow. I hope you all remember, your voice matters." More applause erupted, echoing off the books and high ceilings. Afterward, people lined up to congratulate us, to share their own stories of truth and healing.
A woman in her 70s told Sofia that she'd always been afraid to speak up when she saw bullying, until today, when she realized it was never too late to be honest. A boy in middle school asked if he could illustrate a sequel comic inspired by his grandparents' experiences. Parents thanked us for giving their children permission to be brave. That night, the library's grand hall felt alive with possibility. As we packed up our remaining copies and brochures, I saw a young artist carefully tuck a signed comic into his backpack, as though hiding a treasure meant only for him. I smiled, knowing our story had lit a spark that would continue to burn long after the gala's last note faded. On the drive home, the car was quiet. Sofia, exhausted but radiant, drifted off against the window once more. I glanced at her sleeping form and remembered the first time I'd seen her stand alone before that ballroom crowd. The journey from shame to triumph had been long and winding, but it had brought us here, to a place where honesty and creativity stood hand in hand. At home, I carried Sofia to her room and tucked her in, her raccoon puppet nestled beside her. I lingered in her doorway, watching the soft rise and fall of her chest in the lamplight. Then I slipped downstairs to my studio, knowing that tomorrow the real work would begin again. I gathered fresh paper, sharpened my pencils, and opened my sketchbook to a blank page. The final chapter of Child of the Bayou had closed with our gala homage, but beyond those printed pages lay countless unwritten tales. I sketched the first panel of our next adventure, a young girl beside a nighttime swamp, lantern in hand, as a family of raccoons gazed back at her with curious eyes. Beneath, I penned the words in careful script. When truth leads the way, every story finds its heart. I set my pencil down and looked toward the window where the first stars of the night glimmered. In that quiet moment, I understood that our story was never just our own. It belonged to every child who dared to speak, every family that learned to listen, and every community willing to grow in the light of truth. And as I turned off the lamp, The raccoons in my drawing seemed to twinkle softly, reminding me that the world's greatest stories are those we live together, one courageous word at a time.